Welcome to this special 10-year anniversary show coming to you from the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. I'm Jim Fleisig. During today's show, we will discuss IT success stories at numerous government agencies and hear from the key leaders making them happen. We will be doing the show in 3 segments with 3 different groups of federal executives. With me on the first segment are Charlie Armstrong, the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, and Duncan, the Chief Information Officer at EPA, Doug McGovern, the Chief Information Officer at NGA, and Kevin Reed, the Assistant Director, Information Technology Applications and Data Division at the FBI. We're going to start with Kevin. Kevin, tell us a little bit about a program that over the past year over at the FBI that you guys feel is really making a difference you're proud of.
So just to lead off, my name is Kevin Reed, Assistant Director of IT Applications and Data Division. We support the FBI enterprise-wide with applications from all the way from admin functions, case management, and big data analytics. One of the big things that we have with the current threat environment is really the support and the agility to accommodate threat management, be able to capture complaints, intakes, and source management. And what that really is boiled down to is really case management for the FBI, the cases we do, all operational folks in the field use. The big part of that, the major component part of that is Sentinel, which you have all heard of. Very successful in the last year. When it first began, there were a lot of problems, but really it's become one of the most agile systems, really utilizing DevOps so far in the government. I think it's pretty much one of the models that we can put if using something on the secret enclave. The time to market is basically monthly with 2-week sprint cycles, and we're very proud of that.
Terrific. What are some of the benefits you think the FBI is seeing out of the Sentinel program? I mean, can you translate it into like real life benefits that are accruing?
Well, so some of the real life benefits are really the ability for investigative folks in the field and analysts to really connect the dots of what's going on both from criminal, national security, and intelligence matters. The ability to actually get the data, ingest the data so it can commonly be used across 35,000 employees to do their work is really the big benefit that's really being provided.
Yeah, I'm going to guess speed too, and getting the right data to the right people a lot faster than in some of the traditional ways that it was done.
Absolutely.
How about challenges? I would imagine something of that magnitude and scope, there must have been some real interesting challenges you bumped into along the way.
So significant challenges. Some of the challenge that we faced was really just trying to, from a technology perspective, get the organization to understand what an agile development really meant. Mm-hmm. Being able to bring in users, to get them to really provide the technical folks the requirements, understand what the product was going to come out, how it was going to come out, and how we could roll that into operations in such a short time period with the confidence that they were going to get the accuracy and the quality that they were expecting.
Yeah, I know. I've been following a lot of the agile developments and it's interesting as you talk to different people, the understanding of what is agile development, what it means, and those kinds of things. You get sort of different stories from different folks, so I can understand where getting that information mutually agreed to across an organization like the FBI could be somewhat of a challenge. How about some lessons learned? Is there something you'd pass on to some other colleagues and other government folks that are working these big programs, or some of the things that you learned along the way that perhaps you wish someone would have told you?
Well, so I think some of the complexities involved with agile development is really having an environment in place to do agile development. Some folks put timelines in place, expect they're going to roll products out in 2-week cycles without putting the upfront investment in to really be able to successfully provide products. That's one of the big challenges that we found. The other challenges is basically maturing the process so you can get it down to a short enough period of time so you can provide products that are very neat.
Cool. If I asked you to pick like one key to success, what would jump out?
I think the biggest key to success is adoption by our stakeholders to be part of the process. to really feel as if they are empowered to help deliver the technology that they need to be successful.
Terrific, thanks, man. Good job to everyone over at the FBI that helped on that. How about, let's talk a little bit to Doug McGovern at NGA. Doug, what's a program you'd hold up and one that you're proud to say that you were part of during the last 12 months?
Yeah, so I was very excited to come out and talk about the successes and the great progress we've made in implementing the common desktop environment for the intelligence community. So, and that is a part of a larger program across the community called iSight, so the IC's Information Technology Enterprise. And the desktop is an effort that we started a couple years ago, and we're partnered with DIA to deploy that to the entire community. We're going to complete phase 1 in just a few days. And in the last year, we've deployed almost 50,000 desktops.
Wow.
Across those two agencies. We got the phase 2 effort under contract, and that'll be starting. It's underway right now, and we look forward to deploying the capability to the rest of the community over the next several years.
Wow, terrific. Being someone who's been there and done that, I know the complexity, especially in a large organization where pretty much everybody's got an opinion on what's the right thing to do and the right configuration and so forth. But what are some of the benefits you're seeing, Doug, to NGA?
Well, I think just having a homogeneous capability across the enterprise allows you to be very agile, to be very responsive to providing a reliable and robust and secure service. You know, in the past, coming from an agency that has fostered, you know, hundreds of individual systems, you know, when we looked at the upgrade that we did this year from Microsoft Office 2010 to 2013, in the old days that would have taken months.
Sure.
We did that virtually overnight in a common enterprise desktop environment. And so the ability to maintain that consistent image, maintain that consistent security posture across the enterprise is just a great thing from a CIO perspective and from a mission perspective.
Oh, I'm sure that homogeneous environment to know what everyone has and to be able to address things in a common way. What about the big challenges? What are some of the biggest roadblocks along the way? What kind of hoops do you have to jump through in order to get this done?
Well, so oftentimes it's really trust. Trusting your partners, trusting that other people are going to be there to deliver on their end in a community type environment. And so we developed a very good partnership with DIA for our deployments, but you know, working through the common language and the cultures of how business processes have matured and become ingrained across each agency over many years, you know, breaking those down to improve the business processes and have that common understanding of what we're trying to accomplish.
Doug, I'm glad you said that, because this is radio show 130, and 130 radio shows now. When we talk challenges, someone hits that word culture along the way. It's interesting the way that works out. How about some lessons learned? What are some of the things along the way that you think you know, you wish you would have known maybe in advance, or you'd pass on to others?
Well, I'll bring up two things, and I think we knew them already, but you know, we always you know, learn that we could have paid more attention to those things at the beginning. And you know, the first off is building security in today's cyber environment. It's so critical that you think about cyber from the get-go. It's not a bolt-on anymore. At NGA, we think about cyber and security like air and water, right? You can't live without it. So you got to bake that security capability in up front. The second part, and I think Kevin brought it up, is the intimate involvement of the user and the stakeholder, and paying a lot of attention to what they need and what they want, and that pays great dividends as you deploy these kinds of capabilities.
If I asked you for a key to success, would you say that trust and culture would be a major key?
Yes.
Thanks. That sounds great, man. Love hearing about all these things that are happening around town that you don't get to read about that often. So I'm glad we offer an environment and a venue where we can talk about them.
Thank you.
Ann Duncan, named by Computer World as a Premier 100 Technology Leader. Congratulations. A very nice honor there. Tell us a little bit about EPA and some program there that you think is making a difference.
Thanks, Jim. And I'm going to cheat a little bit on your guide here with what I describe. I want to talk a little bit about our big IT transformation we're doing, and then I'll tell you about a project in it very quickly.
Sure.
So We set about recently to transform all of our IT application delivery with digital services. And to Doug's point, it's all about changing the culture and about how we do everything we do. And we set out to shift away from our legacy behaviors. So we're moving from waterfall to agile. We're moving to being more transparent, to developing in the open versus a closed system where the public sees a big bang at the end. And we're going to a modular API-first construction versus the monolithic systems we've had before. And we're going to the cloud first, trying to get away from having a lot of our programs hosted our vendors. Okay. And finally, we're really focusing on user-centered design versus stakeholder-centered design. So moving away from stakeholder-centered design, which I think is, all those things are really exemplified by our eManifest program. So eManifest is a program that is going to replace the paper that is in waste haulers' trucks. So when you have hazardous waste, there's a piece of paper that travels around with that waste from the facility that created it to its destination facility. And if a truck is on the side of the road and there's something pouring out of the side of it, the only way that, and if you can't get to that piece of paper in the truck, the only way you can figure out what's in it is to look at the little numbers and letters on the side and try and figure out what might be in that truck, because your key is sitting in the cab of that truck. So we think that it's important, and Congress thought it was important, that we actually be able to tell people what's in that truck, and that they can look at it electronically online all the time. But that program has had some challenges. It's had challenges with authorization, with funding, and with getting started. And so we took that as our first candidate for our new agile way of doing things.
Oh, cool, very cool. Well, the benefits sound obvious to me. How about some key lessons learned along the way as you work through this program?
So with this program, we were really stuck trying to get all the requirements up front. There were some technical problems that we didn't actually know how to solve, and the team was stuck trying to define the answers to those problems so that we could tell a vendor, here's how to solve this. One of the lessons that came out of this program is, let's go try something. Let's take a few technical challenges to that problem, experiment with them, in an agile way, and figure out what the right answer is to solve that problem. We also learned very quickly, or this was one of our goals, is that we were stuck with a monolithic acquisition, right? We thought it was going to be 18 months before we could start development. Sure. So we found an agile way to get a development contract in place with 18F, and now with some of our other existing contracts, we think we'll actually be done with our development before we ever would have gotten an acquisition in place with a full and open.
Interesting about 18F too, because we've been talking about talking to them on a radio show too, and seeing how that program works. I know when it first came out, there was some controversy around it. How about some keys to success, or some of the things that you think helped you get this program going and getting the funding or whatever's necessary and really making good progress?
So I think one of the real keys to success was shifting to a user-centered design model. We had been very focused on what our stakeholders wanted, and when we actually went out and talked to waste haulers, we discovered that what they wanted us to develop first was an API-based solution, because they already had systems in place. They really wanted just to be able to talk to our system. We were focused on building out this platform where you could go in and you could enter their information, and they're like, no, don't do that. We want you to just give us an API. So that was a really key item for our success in making that transition to what the waste haulers actually want us to deliver, because they're our customers, not the federal government.
And other than the obvious safety issues, are you seeing some other major benefits come out of this?
Well, so eManifest is not deployed yet. So right now, the huge benefits we're seeing is as a model for the agency about how we can do Agile. And frankly, it's a model for anyone who wants to look, because we're doing development in the open. You can go to, anyone in the public can go to the website and see the Trello board where the developers are working. They can look at the code on GitHub. We'll accept code contributions from members of the public if someone actually wanted to contribute code and participate in the program. So that's a real model, and we've used that model. We use that concurrently on the Enterprise, which is another one of our big programs, and we've got several other programs that are following that model of testing out these services and using Cloud Foundry and Cloud.gov and a bunch of things like that.
Terrific. It sounds like you've created an environment for the future that's going to make development a lot smoother and a lot easier. Congratulations on that and on your recognition.
Thanks, Jim.
Mr. Armstrong, Charlie Armstrong, boy, no one talks about the border these days, you know.
Haven't heard it on the news at all.
Tell us, Charlie, let's pick up one of your programs that you're proud of, that you think really made progress this past year.
Well, Jim, this is a very difficult question for me, because hundreds of programs, everything ranging from counter networks, counter drug networks, counterterrorism, to moving goods across the border and making sure that happens, not just from a legal standpoint, but
Right.
making sure that things
Right.
flow quickly to keep the economy flowing.
Right. I know a lot of people forget that issue. They talk, let's secure the border, but yet we have commerce. You got to move things across.
We do. And, a lot of people don't realize that we were the first revenue collection agency that was started back in 1789, and we collect about $45 billion worth of
Right. I think
of
second
revenue.
highest collector now, right?
Yes. So obviously IRS dwarfs us,
Right.
But we're still proud of that mission. And as part of that mission, it's really important for us to maintain public trust. And for years, we've been battling this problem of email spoofing, where malicious actors were out there, using top-level email addresses of our leadership, our commissioner, our deputy commissioner, key people in enforcement positions, to go out and elicit for ill intent, either
Spoof the public.
either you didn't pay your duty, or we need further information, further PII information, and go to this website, or email us back, or send us a check, or so it's been a very difficult challenge for us for years, and it's been a top level thing for our leadership to try to address. And in the past, we've been kind of playing whack-a-mole with it, but this year we really took it serious and went out and tackled that problem. And I'm happy to say that we've pretty much shut it down. It's like everything else. We call it Jello. You shut it down and it morphs a little bit this way or that way, but for the most part, we've shut it down, and very proud of that.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I do know a little bit about that. I monitored that as you were working that. We talked about it. And not only just shut it down, he shut it down quick,
Yes.
which was pretty cool. What are some of the key benefits? I guess the benefits are the security there. How about challenges along the way?
So, we used a service provider, right? So we didn't try to tackle this ourselves. We went out into industry on people that were working these issues, and some of the key pieces were ensuring that we had operators and technical folks working with the service providers to help identify not just from a email address level, but content of email type of things on what to look for in order to scan for these kinds of emails and shut them down at the points of presence.
Wow, terrific. Well, I want to first say thanks to all four of our guests for taking time from your busy schedules to be here to share your stories with you, and to congratulate you on the progress you're making. This is meaningful not just for you and your agency, this is meaningful for everybody in the country. So thank you for your service for that. And we're going to hear from some more government guests here shortly, but first we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Profiles in Excellence Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. We are celebrating our 10th year anniversary show from the National Press Club. We're talking about some of the profiles of great programs around town. With me on the second segment are Joe Klimavicz, the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Justice, Donna Roy, the Executive Director, DHS Information Sharing Environment Office, Steve Cooper, the Chief Information Officer, Department of Commerce, and Richard McKinney, the Chief Information Officer, Department of Transportation. Let's start with Richard. Richard, tell us about something happening over transportation that's exciting and you're proud of.
Okay. I'm going to tell you about a healthcare.gov thing that almost happened but didn't happen.
Seems like we've heard that story
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. The Takata we had you all remember the Takata Airbag recall? Well, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, had a website called VIN Lookup, and where you could go to this website and you could type your VIN number of your car in, and you would get recall information about your car. And when that Takata Airbag story broke, that URL for VIN lookup was widely published in the press, and a site that probably never had more than 3,000 people a day, that first day had 130,000 people hit it, and it brought it to its knees. And I realized I was headed down the wrong road with that, and
then you said to yourself, boy, I wonder who's in charge of this program, and then you looked in the mirror and said,
you say, hey, it's me, yeah. So I thought, well, this isn't going to go well if we don't fix this. So I reached out to Greg Meyer over at Microsoft, called him up and said, Greg, I got a pants on fire issue. I need help. I really need to move this up onto Azure. I need some scalability here. And he was kind enough to bring some resources down, and we sat down and reworked that app and moved it up, struck a deal, moved it up onto the Azure platform. About 3 weeks later, we got the app up, got it running. About 3 weeks later on the Today Show, they did a story on the Takata Airbag, and they published that URL again. And that Monday, 15 million people hit that application, and it scaled up and scaled down. And I didn't even hear about it for 2 days, which tells you 2 days later, someone came to me and said, yeah, we had 15 million hits on Monday, and it was all cool. It was just fine.
that is really cool story.
Yeah, and it saved our bacon. I mean, when I told the secretary how much money I would have had to spend to put the kind of hardware in place to be able to withstand that kind of, it was, in the millions, and he, the bill for that site for the month was in the thousands. And it was a real teaching moment for the department because it made the cloud real. It showed everybody, that when geeky folks talk about the cloud, that we're not just,
Right.
It's just not like,
Right.
that we've fallen in love with some kind of faddish thing, that there's a real reason why the cloud is going to serve us well.
And when you get a scaling issue like that, you just can't throw equipment at it. I know in the old days when I was
Right.
at Treasury, IRS said when they went to electronic filing, we just kept throwing more servers at it, till finally we said, wait a minute, we can't sustain this.
Yeah.
We need a better plan than this. So yeah, that's an excellent story. What are some of the lessons learned along the way on that one?
Don't hesitate. I'm glad I picked up that phone and made that phone call. We need to architect. This is the way we need to architect for the future. We need to think about scalability and response and cost, and so.
And do you think the key to success there was that industry-government partnership? I mean,
Yeah,
basically
absolutely.
saying,
Absolutely.
if we partner together, we can make this happen?
Yeah. Greg took me very seriously and said, I can tell you're nervous. And I said, oh, I'm very nervous. Mm-hmm. He brought people who it's funny because we got him in the room and we said, have you ever had it, because we said, do you know how to scale an app up to like 1 million hits a day? And they kind of looked at us like,
Right.
yeah, this isn't our first rodeo, Richard.
Yeah, right. Well, that truly is an excellent story. Thanks for sharing that one with us. Steve Cooper, over at Commerce Department, CIO. Steve, tell us something cool going on over there that we want to hear about.
Jim, thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to share a very recent story. It concerns our Enterprise Security Operations Center. I've
read a lot of positive stuff about that, so I'm glad you're sharing that.
That's good news. Believe it or not, before this calendar year, 2015, we did not have at the department level in the Department of Security the ability, think situational awareness, to actually see, if you will, all of the state of our networks from a cybersecurity threat, vulnerability, and risk perspective. We were dependent upon data calls to our bureaus. Now think about that. From a risk management standpoint and my responsibility to inform my deputy secretary and secretary of the well-being of the Department of Commerce with regard to cybersecurity,
the subunits.
I had to go ask for this stuff and wait for a response to come back. So here's the really good news. In January of 2015, we went live with our ESOK, Enterprise Security Operations Center, which gave us initially 5-day-a-week, 8 hours a day watch capability. Interestingly enough, if a bad actor attacked us on the weekend, we still wouldn't have known about it until Monday morning. All right, now the good news, the reason I can share this publicly, we've solved this problem.
Excellent.
Okay, but we came live to deliver initial operating capability using a whole suite of tools and products that basically gave us full analysis and coverage of initially our major bureaus' networks. We actually put sensors into their networks that fed basically a watch center. We're now fully staffed 24/7. We brought that capability live in June of this year, 3 months ahead of schedule. The neat thing about this is we're co-located with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Prior to kind of the original plan for all of this was for the Office of the CIO to stand up its own watch center separate from and located somewhere other than with an existing bureau. So this is a huge success for the department, and the neat thing about it is the collaboration. Co-located NOAA's facility in West Virginia, and then as we progress into this continuing fiscal year, we will add additional sensors and reach down into our smaller networks in our bureaus.
And you think the key to success there is that collaboration and getting everybody sort of working together there?
Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind we significantly speeded up the time frame for delivery. We did it by leveraging NOAA's existing facility and expertise. NOAA actually helped us by actually having their folks, their trained folks, take some of those early watch standing opportunities. So huge kudos to NOAA and the other bureaus. So this was kind of a breakthrough. I wish I could claim, oh yeah, I did this on my watch. Yes, it happened on my watch, but it had been set in motion by one of my colleagues today, Joe Klimavicz, when he was actually the CIO at NOAA, along with my predecessor, Simone Zickman, and Rod Turk, our Chief Information Security Officer, along with the men and women who comprise the information security teams.
Sure. Excellent story, Steve. Congratulations to you and your team and those before you that got it off and running. Let's talk a little bit with Donna Roy here about the information sharing environment. You know, when Richard was talking, it reminded me when you first took over information sharing at DHS, it was struggling too. And I mean, I was reading about going to be shut down and this, that, and the other thing. Now, lo and behold, here it is, a success story. Tell us, Don, a little bit about that or any other program you'd like to talk about.
So thank you for having me.
Sure.
It's been 9 years this month since I've been at DHS. First came to work on a program that Steve Cooper and Van Hitch at the time had started, the National Information Exchange Model.
I remember that.
Yes, awesome little program. Got some traction with that one, and then took over the Homeland Security Information Network, and we've sort of evolved our understanding of the information sharing environment, right? So today, after almost 10 years, we've got the operators, the data, and we're starting to see mission outcomes by weaving together these capabilities. So we're not talking about which platforms we need to build, we're talking about how we enhance the platforms we have and put more data and more users on them. And what makes me happy is that in the department, we're finally talking about the data, and the data as it moves into exciting programs like the data framework, which gives us a capability to use our own data in the most valuable ways in the department. And so we've been able to weave together all of these concepts and make significant progress.
And the benefits you're seeing are just improved information sharing, which, boy, is that critical these days with the things going on around the world.
Yeah, we're seeing uses of HISN that we never thought we'd see before. So we've got uses of HISN on every national security event. When you were watching the Papal visit, my people were helping Secret Service manage the information sharing around the Papal visit, as an example. So
wow.
Every national event in this country now, my people are somewhere there helping host capabilities to allow people to share. The National Information Exchange model, who knew, but it's being even used at the Department of Transportation by my friends over there at the end.
And what do you think what would you cite as the keys to success? What helped turn that program around and really get it off and rolling and get it to where it is today?
I think it's leadership support at the department. First, we'd have a continued series of leaders that have supported these activities over time, and we've been able to sell the vision that they're all part of a bigger picture. That includes support from the program manager at the information sharing environment. That includes support inside the department and certainly our friends on the Hill. But I think the biggest piece is that it's community driven, and we built our capabilities to solve the user's needs, and the users used it. So on his end, as an example, we've doubled our daily use just in the past year. So people are using it because they're finding it useful, and the need is there more than ever.
Don't you love it when you build a system and it actually gets used and the growth actually continues to grow? Then you'll have Richard's problem with scope here and scale. But I guess that's a good problem to have.
If we have that problem, we'll be calling Richard for sure.
And your biggest challenge along the way, do you think?
Is still the cultural issues around information sharing, right? The human tendency to want to keep your information for yourself. But I see the more we see these platforms used, the more we get stronger mission outcomes across federal agencies or from our federal to state local partners. We're seeing that culture change based on the mission outcomes.
Yeah, actually, that whole information and intelligence sharing kinds of issues, I think on the surface people think, boy, that shouldn't be hard to do, but when you actually get into that and start looking what's behind it, especially if you have classified information involved in the process, and having people understand just the semantics of what information is and so forth becomes a real challenge.
It's a big challenge. 950 databases in the department collected under 11 laws.
Wow.
11 laws. So just the math of that times that means there's a lot of complicated conversations around how you share information.
Yeah, very cool. Congratulations and keep up the good work. Boy, it's exciting stuff. Joe Klimavicz at Department of Justice. We already heard your name here, Joe, on when you were over NOAA. In fact, Joe's been a good friend of the radio show. He's been on the past 3 years. He's been on at NOAA, and he's again now at the Department of Justice. But tell us some cool things you're doing over at Justice, Joe.
Well, thanks, Jim. Glad to be back. So my focus at Justice has really been focusing on how we can apply technology to the mission, to the business side of things, and achieve efficiencies and push innovation, especially around the information sharing. I'm glad I'm here with Donna to talk about information sharing, because I want to talk about information, 2 programs, one on information sharing, one on applying advanced data analytics. The first one, Tribal Access Program. It's been in the news a bit. TAP is what we're calling it, but we launched it in August of 2015, and we're trying to provide federally recognized tribes, and there's about 600 of these federally recognized tribes, access to national crime information databases for both civil and criminal purposes. And TAP will allow them to more effectively serve and protect their communities, ensuring that there's an exchange both ways in terms of critical information.
Sure.
And the second one is a program called Automated Litigation Support Services. Within the department, we spend a significant amount of funds and resources really on that litigation support activity. And we wanted to look at sharing tools, sharing technologies, and really pushing the advanced analytics, making sure that everyone, all components, had access to these tools, and establishing standard operating procedures and processes to maximize the efficiency. So one of the things we did on this was to establish 6 pilot programs, and I put out the strategic guidance, the direction, how we wanted to go about doing this, and then asked the components, the litigating components, to actually build proposals against my direction.
Very interesting.
It is a very interesting model.
Yeah.
And we secured funding to fund these pilots, and they're well underway and very successful at this point. But
and I'm interested in lessons learned on that. I'm building the model and having the components pushed. How did that go?
Well, I've been around a little while. I've learned that trying to force a solution on components is probably not the best way to go. So
herding cats.
Right. So if you can come up with a good problem definition, here's the problem, and here's how technology can help in this area, or how we can collectively address the problem, and then have the components propose solutions. Now, much like within the intelligence community,
Sure.
the eyesight, who's volunteering to step up and lead certain activities. What we saw is certain components had solutions in place that they were using locally. We were trying to make those services available across the department, and we've been successful in these areas.
And if you had to pass a lesson learned on to your colleagues around town, what would you suggest in terms of, here's something that I learned through this process that could be useful to you?
Well, I think, again, we've heard about collaboration, communications. You really can't do that enough. I mean, you really need to understand, and I had a steep learning curve coming in new to the department, but really understanding the problem set, the customers, what they needed, what may have been tried previously, and then really working with the customers who have to use the solution in the end, much like the Agile
Sure.
development, figuring out what's going to work, and it really is a great idea for them to actually lead these programs consistent with your guidance and direction.
Fantastic. Four home runs again here, guys. Thanks for sharing the great news. Thanks for taking time from your busy schedules to be with us and share the great news of these success stories around town. With that, we're going to go to our third segment with some other government guests coming together. But before that, we're going to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Profiles in Excellence Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. We are celebrating our 10th year anniversary show from the National Press Club. I'm Jim Fleizik. With me on the final segment today, we have Luke McCormack, the Chief Information Officer, Department of Homeland Security, Sandy Peavy, the CIO at FLETC, Adrian Gardner, the Chief Information Officer at FEMA, and Kshemendra Paul, the Program Manager of the Information Sharing Environment at ODNI. Kshemendra, let's start with you. We heard a little already about information sharing, and I know you've been, when I think of information sharing, I mean, you're the guy, you've been there, and we followed all the things in the press. There's something new coming out every day, and it's all very positive. Tell us a little bit about what you'd like to share with us today about a program you've got rolling.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And I'm also struck listening to the panelists, the previous panelists, the amount of information sharing going on, the progress with our partners at DOJ, FBI, DHS, the intelligence community across the civilian agencies. Quite remarkable. It's great to hear. Our mission is strengthening collaboration and coordination in the domestic nexus of national security and public safety to combat terrorism and other priority threats. The thing when you think about this space is the awesome complexity. 18,000 police departments in this country, 90% of which have 50 or fewer sworn officers.
And the awesome importance right now.
Yeah, and the awesome importance, the privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties concerns, the need to maintain community engagement, to use open government techniques of transparency, participation, and collaboration to build out that enterprise view. And yeah, the threat, the constantly morphing and evolving threat. The thing I wanted to highlight was some progress that we've helped catalyze with our mission partners, federal and state and local, around aligning field-based intelligence and information sharing entities. We've had fusion centers since 9/11, an organic response by states, major urban areas, partially supported by the federal government, but mostly paid for by our state and local partners. Prior to that, we had HIDAs, high-intensity drug trafficking centers. War on drugs, 80s and 90s.
And of course, they all still exist.
They still exist, and they've got a mission, and they're constantly working. Heroin is a big issue these days, and they're focused on that. Prior to that, we had risk centers, regional information sharing centers, going back to the 70s and the war on regional organized crime. So you can see information sharing architectures layered on top of each other, going back to the 70s. Until recently, they were relatively stovepiped.
Right.
In addition to those state-based entities, you had JTTFs, Joint Terrorism Task Forces, other federal type of task forces. In the last several years, there's been a concerted effort to drive alignment and interoperability across those entities through information sharing, responsible information sharing. The specific thing we led off with was what's called deconfliction. The idea that if you're going to conduct a law enforcement operation, a lawful operation, you want to make sure from a collaboration perspective, an information sharing perspective, an officer safety perspective, that you're coordinating with other agencies. Think about a place like Los Angeles, 160 police departments within that jurisdiction. So 5 months ago, we went live with a national capability where you deconflict in one of the previously stovepipe systems, you're now deconflicting in them all.
Right.
This is a technical advance, a business process, and a policy
Right.
advance. It's also an advance in terms of culture change and federating trust at scale.
Mm-hmm. So in a layman's term, if, the local police can have access to information that the federal police, the other various police jurisdictions, so, because we used to have stories in the past where someone might have a wanted criminal record and be stopped locally, and that they have no idea of knowing that they're wanted for something serious at the federal level. So that's a major safety improvement. Tell us about the lessons learned along the way. What are some of the lessons you've learned working your way through this program?
The number one lesson learned was persistence. We've been working this challenge for some time, creating the space to allow folks to listen to their better angels, to come together, to experiment, to build trust that's relationship-based, then to take that next step and try to scale that up so that the trust is within their systems and all that. You talked about how culture change is always mentioned in these sort of settings, and that was key too. Was focusing on the culture change.
Sure, especially when you're dealing with federal, state, local levels, law enforcement, intelligence sharing, and so forth.
The hardest issue weren't the technical issues. They used the NEAM framework and the federated identity and access management stuff that we've been championing, but the real hard nugget was getting folks to where they were willing to trust their sensitive operational information at arm's length through this distributed network.
Yeah.
And that,
Well done. Well done. I'll tell you, keep up the good work. You got like 300 million Americans cheering for you on this one because it's important for the safety of our country going forward. Sandy Peavy, tell us some neat, cool stuff going on down there at FLETC. Every time I talk to you, you got something really cool and a neat new thing you're doing.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for having me here. It's been really very fulfilling today because I got to see a lot of my old colleagues where we helped stand the Department of Homeland Security up. So to all of you guys out there in the audience that helped with that, thank you very much. Some of the things that we're doing now, the biggest thing that we're looking at, because you hear and see all the bad things that are happening out there in the world today, and the demand for law enforcement training is going through the roof. And so we've got to figure out how to get that training to them anytime, any place, and from the time that they actually get their gun and badge until the time that they retire that gun and badge. And we're doing it through a lot of different things. We're doing a really good job with some simulations. We're doing a lot more with driving simulations, which you've had a chance to.
I just have to brag about it. I went down there, they put me on the driving simulator. I think I smashed the car 4 times in the first minute. But.
Yeah, I think they still have him there as the what not to do when you're doing the driving simulators. And we're doing firearm simulators, which that is a really interesting way that we're doing the training and stuff. We're doing marine simulators. We're doing after-action reviews. And the after-action reviews have been very great for the students, because what happens there is we put them in scenarios and we have these cameras and things, and so then they get to see the scenario and what actually happens. And when they do that, a lot of times because their heart rates are up, it's like they're actually doing the event. And they'll come back and say, I didn't do that. And the instructor's going, oh yeah, you did, and here's your evidence.
Yeah, right.
So, but one of the biggest things that we're doing, Jim, that I think is going to have the most impact is, you heard Donna Roy talking to you earlier about HISN.
Right.
All right, and so she talked about the operational piece of HISN, and what we're trying to do is put the training piece in there so that they do have, that your law enforcement officers, the 1 million plus that we just heard talk about earlier, so that from the time they get that gun and badge until the time they retire, they've got this one place they can go and they can do their operational mission and they can do the training at the same time. And just a real quick, something to just kind of bring the story home is that we're looking at doing communities of interest. And unfortunately, in this day and time, one of the most on-demand courses that we have is active shooter training. And so imagine that you have, and we've had this, one of the shooter that took down the person, the police officer that took the shooter down in the Navy Yard, he had just been to our training. So imagine that you can get into a community of interest and you have this person that has just gone through the experience, and that you have the people that have been through the active shooter training, and they're there and they can talk to the person, they can get real life lessons learned. We maybe can change our training to help that. So we're doing a lot of stuff trying to get
But isn't that, it's kind of ironic and it's coincidental in a way, but it's just perfect that someone who has been trained immediately gets to put that training to positive use and actually probably save a lot of lives.
Right.
That's and some lessons learned along the way as you move to these new technologies. Are they accepted right away? I mean, people okay with simulation versus the live stuff?
You can imagine with because you were with Secret Service for quite some time, so as you can imagine, some of it is a real culture change.
Sure.
It's easier for some of the new ones coming in, but when they are there and actually go through the training and see the added value, then they become true believers. And a good thing with this is like the firearm simulations, because what happens is that when you have a gun, then the instructor has to tell you what to do and he steps back.
Right.
All right. When you have a simulator, you're there, he can talk to you, he's not stepping back, you've got more trigger pulls,
The whole
you've got
safety
all
environment. The whole
kinds,
safety environment's totally different.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Adrian Gardner over at FEMA now. Adrian, tell us, well, you have quite a career with through your days at NASA and so forth, and now FEMA, which I assume presents a whole new set of challenges for you. But tell us about some cool things you think you got going there, Adrian.
Yeah, it does. And so I've been there about 2.5 years. We're on what we've characterized as sort of a stabilize, optimize, and transform sort of path.
Okay.
My very first year was about stabilizing the environment, understanding the environment, what do we actually own and manage from an IT perspective. You would think that that was already a known entity, but many of us know that the looming shadow IT and the various aspects of program versus CIO, so the whole decentralized environment in which we execute is an important piece of it, and so understanding the environment was the very first step. This year, what we've been doing is really focusing on governance, and so coming out of this piece where we actually stabilized the environment, characterized it from a security standpoint, gain an understanding of exactly the 200 systems that we've actually managed and authorized at the end of the stabilization period. We now then put those under governance because we actually reduced the portfolio. This year, we're actually endeavoring to move the portfolio down by around 50 systems. The review gave us the opportunity to appropriately govern, and what I mean by that is, if you think about decentralized execution and sort of centralized governance, that's sort of our model. We now brought all of the stakeholders to the same table where we are governing and have an IT governance board meeting every 2 weeks that's chaired by myself and the deputy administrator. The ability to make then strategic decisions that impact both resources as well as mission enablement are made at that table from an IT perspective.
Yeah, I think people miss too, some people say, oh, governance, but it is so important if you get that in place because it's there for the long run.
Right. And then I think the other thing is that the linkage to actual budget. So one of the things that we did was, we realized that as we looked at our Exhibit 53, it was somewhat tied to our financial system, but not directly. And so one of the things that we've done this year also is actually put in a project code for each one of our IT systems. So as they procure different pieces of equipment to support that actual system, now we have true visibility into tracking. So that's something new, but by the end of this fiscal year, what we'll be able to do is then, with a keystroke, actually look at our amount of IT spend and how it relates then to system boundary.
Wow, that'll be great for your industry partners too, because I know over the years when they look at some of the public documents and then try to match them to the budget and try to match them to what the agency actually does, it's an impossible task.
Correct.
So, by getting all that stuff lined up, I think it'll make it easier for industry partners to work with you.
Right, and I think the other aspect of it is it allowed us to be more agile in our strategic decision making. So for example, when the OPM breach occurred, to identify my high-valued assets, I had those in hand because I had done the initial stabilization piece, would place those under governance, so then I actually could pull very quickly out which systems actually contain PII,
Excellent.
personal identifiable information, which ones were mission essential, and then actually which ones also had financial data. So that's sort of the major benefit to it.
And if I asked you for some lessons learned along the way doing this and some of the things you think were keys to success?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is know your customer base. Every CIO, I was, as a new CIO, getting out to the field was important. I
remember when you first went in,
Right.
I was having a hard time catching up with you because you were somewhere
Absolutely.
around the country all the time.
I went to installations where they hadn't seen a CIO in 10 years, 5 years, 4 years. How can we actually provide them services if they don't know us and we don't know them? I think the second thing is which has already been mentioned, is collaboration. The understanding how to collaborate, how to build relationships. Now I can pick up the phone and speak to field leaders if I have an issue. If we're trying to support them, my team actually does a lot of the field support.
Yeah.
So we set up joint field operations centers in the field. We work with the regional administrators to make that happen. Before, that wasn't sort of a phone call. That was
Right.
sort of, I'm throwing some stuff over the transom, and we all collaborate and sort of
Right.
work well together. Now I actually know them. So if there's an issue, it doesn't bubble up
Right.
through, and we can actually resolve the issue at the lowest level.
Makes a big difference when you shake hands and get to know somebody than when you have a situation you need to work together or address an important topic, to be able to pick up the phone and have a relationship with that other person. Well done. Mr. McCormack, Luke McCormack, tell us a little bit. You've got one heck of a mission. You got a large organization that, according to organizations, is still very, very young and relatively new in overall. Meanwhile, you have some cultures have been around for hundreds of years, other ones that are new. Has to be some interesting things. Tell us some things that are going on, Luke, that you're proud of and you're seeing some real progress being made at the department level.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, and yeah, it's a lot of moving parts, and I thank all of you out there that have helped us sort of shape some of those parts. I'm going to talk about what we're calling the open market strategy. We're sort of working that in 3 phases. Phase 1 is where we're taking our current computing assets and building off of the good work that Richard had done to do a lot of consolidation, and focusing on where it makes sense to continue to consolidate, sort of hold in place where maybe there's some other opportunities, restructuring those contracts so that we have more of a direct channel between the engineering entities within the components directly to the vendor, and I think that's very powerful because there's a lot of work that's being done in real time.
Sure.
And we want to make sure that there's a direct relationship there, and that really working off of the consumption-based model that was put in place and continuing to expand that on our private sort of computing service offerings, if you will, and there's a variety of services. The second piece is expanding that capability. This is sort of the open market piece of this into the private sector cloud services, the FedRAMP cloud
Sure.
services. There's a lot of work going on there right now in regards to piloting a variety of services and putting together contracts to structure that once again so that the operating components can buy those computing services directly from those cloud service providers, whether it's infrastructure as a service all the way up to a software as a service type of capability.
Right, we're talking about that on a lot of our shows, how the hybrid clouds, public clouds, private clouds, how it impacts data center consolidation, data center plans, future plans there, all those, again, as you phrased them, moving parts.
And there's a blend there, and so there's a lot of work that's going on in the architecture area, as you can imagine, a lot of work going on in the security area where we're putting a defense and Dept capability in place to make sure that all those assets are secured, whether they're running in a cloud environment, public cloud environment, private cloud environment. And in most cases, as most CIOs know, there's a blend. It's always a blend. It's typically not one service running in one place and it's not touching anything else. There's always a blend there. The third one, which is really why we're doing this, is to build applications on top of that, right? And this is where we're really looking at the leveraging the digital service plays, where we're looking at the open market and the open type of technologies that are out there, open source technologies, looking at these modern technology stacks, using agile and continuous development, these new development techniques. Several of the components have already started to do that. Charlie in the back there has been doing that with ACE for some time, having some great success with CIS as well. We've picked 4 projects that are in various stages. some that are in the in sort of stage 0, which is one of the ones that we're working with FEMA on, all the way up to some that are, I wouldn't call it a rescue, but it's a restructuring of the way they're doing it today, and sort of restructuring that into a sort of a traditional development model into a new model. We've gotten some good feedback early from what Charlie did with ACE and what CIS did with transformation, and using that open source plethora of capabilities to allow these folks to get access to that very quickly and build using those new modern techniques.
There's an app for that, and then when the kids enter the workforce, they're going to expect an app for that, open source. Well, we're running out of time here. I just want to, again, thank our guest and thank the 4 of you for taking time from your busy schedules to be with us and share these great stories and great progress being made. I'd like to thank our sponsors, without which we don't have a show. Thank the good people at Federal News Radio and here at the National Press Club. And of course, most importantly, our listening audience. Thanks to all those for giving us 10 wonderful years, and we look forward to continuing the program in the future and keep getting these positive stories out. With that, you've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.